If Russia won the Cold War, then this would be the most popular language studied in each country. The app Duolingo would probably also look like this in this universe. As you can see throughout the map, it is extremely red, and that is because many of the top languages every country's learning is Russian. But of course, we're using the Soviet Union flag because they haven't collapsed in this universe. Remember, the end of the Cold War happened as the Soviet Union collapsed, and they eventually just turned into Russia. And actually, in this world, the Cold War ended because the United States collapsed, and they have obviously carved us way up. Now, it's safe to say that even in a world where the US loses the Cold War, we're still speaking English. However, there's a lot of places that are going to want to learn Russian because that is the dominant and most, I guess, economically powerful language in the world. However, Florida's going back to their roots with Spanish. Also, I'm now just realizing this specific Spanish flag is referencing the old communist or Republic of Spain. So it's safe to say Spain is communist, as well as probably a lot of countries around the world have become communist since the USSR won. Mexico is still trying to learn English, but I'm very confused how England got this flag in this universe. Ireland's trying to learn Old Irish languages. This is definitely a world where East Germany unites all of Germany. Probably safe to say literally all of Europe is under communism. California might be a puppet state to China since we are learning Chinese, but the Pacific Northwest states are learning Japanese. I have no idea why we're learning. Is that Tanzania in the deep south? Even with the Soviets winning the Cold War, still are a whole lot of weeb countries, including Peru, learning Japanese too. They obviously speak French in Quebec, even in this universe, and a lot of people are very interested in this Canadian province because there's a lot of countries surrounding them or provinces that are learning French. This would be a very interesting world because now I imagine kind of like a secondary Cold War between like the Soviets and then China. Obviously both nations are communist, but they kind of do communism a little bit differently. This is all based off a quote, "If it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking Russian right now." Well, there you go. Another version of the Cold War, but in this universe, it's the Soviets versus the British. This is the world as of 1974. So immediately what I'm reading is the Americans never had a successful revolution. We never got our independence, so this is all still under the British Empire. Meanwhile, there's literally chaos in all the other states. So I think it's safe to say the world wars still played out similarly. I mean, at the end of the day, the US was on the British side on both World War I and World War II, and the British and Russians were both allied to each other 2 times to take out Germany. So this new Cold War isn't that different. Well, then again, maybe it is, because I'm looking around other areas on the map and things are very different. Of course, not South America. Nothing ever changes in South America. So again, this is a Germany that's united under East Germany. So this is just communist Germany. We also have a communist Italy. France is likely allied to the West and the British. We also have an Iberian Union here. These do not look like communist nations, so this is also the West. What I'm confused about is how the British stole all this away from the French. Maybe they didn't steal it in this universe, they just got to it first. It appears most of this continent of Africa, the British have full control. The spots with Portuguese and Spanish influences. Oh, we also have like a South Africa that was colonized by the Dutch. It's now communist though. British still have a lot of overseas territories. Obviously in this world, the British never collapsed. They also have a stranglehold still on South Asia. A part of India got their independence. Also here's Tibet. There's probably no Vietnam War, or maybe it happened and then the French just got kicked out immediately. There's no America to, fight that war in 1974. Is this a Dutch Thailand? We got a communist Malaysia, or at least this part. Indonesia's still here. Obviously Australia and New Zealand hasn't changed at all. Philippines look pretty split up. Or is this just one flag? They're just communist. Everything's still pretty normal here, with Japan being, I think they're capitalist, and then the split of the Korean Peninsula. However, one thing's for sure is Japan would not be able to defend itself quite as easily because there's no like straight, ally across the pond. This is just chaos over here. And I guess the British would be there kind of from like Washington, Vancouver. Honestly, this seems like a Cold War that the British are absolutely going to lose. I mean, I'm just assuming that London still got the crap bombed out of it during World War II. I feel like under the surface, they're probably just barely holding on to all these colonies overseas. Didn't even notice the Trotsky, Mexico. That means they're communists too. Really interesting map. I like that. What if China was more like Russia? Or you could say, what if China had their own manifest destiny in a way? Kind of more like the US. Here's an ethnic map of the extent of the Han Chinese people. So this is a world where several centuries ago, the Chinese decided they were going to connect their empire to the Black Sea. So they started here, moved all the way through Central Asia, got to the Caspian Sea, which is actually not even on this map, and even took over all of Turkey. Now, there still is a massive Russian Federation up here. They just got beat out from taking all this stuff down this way. I should add this small detail, the People's Republic. That means that this is still a communist China. I was wondering like what time period we're talking about here. Of the other Easter eggs, we have Hindustan, so Indochina that's united. Also possibly a big Bulgaria and Kurdistan. I woke up this morning with this in my camera roll. I'm pretty sure I made it whilst intoxicated last night. It's like it came to him in a dream. Geographically speaking, there would be a lot of hurdles that the Chinese would have to jump through or jump over in this sense. Remember that there are massive physical barriers that historically kept the Chinese from moving out this way. Obviously there's the Gobi Desert and then the Tibetan Plateau right here. We're also assuming the Chinese would be able to conquer the harsh lands of Iran and, well, the Middle East all the way to Turkey. That would not be a very fun or easy thing to do at all. But honestly, who cares? Great intoxicated map. I cannot believe one of my students drew this in their textbook. Mr. Stauffer, I had no idea that I would have to return this book. I thought my parents had bought it for me. Absolutely disgusting. I'm less worried about the barbaric damage to the book than about the violent imagery I see in this textbook. I'm referring you to receive a mental health assessment. This is such a creative idea to make an imaginary map. This is supposed to be a map of 2024 Europe. However, I think the Soviets won the Cold War again, judging by the European Socialist League right here. But the blue nations represent, I guess, this fascist alliance, supposedly. Now, keep in mind, these are not the scribbles of the mentally deranged student at all, but he is critical of them, dominates Europe with brutal dictators, the Allies. In this universe, the student refers to the lowlands as scared, or wait, no, scarred. One of those. Says the UK is the good guys. Throw them in the gulag. Ireland is sympathetic to terror. Graffiti on Norway. This has nothing to do with alternative maps. This is just what Norway looks like. They made a mistake. Wow. How dare they not label Finland? Well, maybe Finland is like a nuclear apocalypse, like a wasteland. Eurasia Federation. Okay, so something else has happened here. Why is Poland a screaming Yoda? Really doesn't like Georgia or Armenia. Evil. Greeks need their freedom. This is probably the most creative alternative history map I've ever seen. That teacher literally be like, no matter what nations or empires lived and died, students will always be drawing and ruining textbooks like this. What if Britain had their own Napoleon? I actually do not think the world would be ready for this. What would he look like without all that French style? I feel like it wouldn't really feel right. So instead of almost all of Europe being controlled by Napoleon in 1812, this is a world where a British Napoleon pretty much controls all of Europe in 1812. They pretty much have client states in all of France and the Iberian Peninsula, all the way down here to Naples as well as Germany, and they even still stretch to the Austrian Empire as well. Now, for those wondering, this is what our world actually looked like in the year 1812. I love how the map that we were looking at, very similar, like the art styles similar to this one. Yes, the Empire of France and Napoleon did also extend to the Empire of Austria over here. I think it is safe to say that if Napoleon was born British, they would be a bit bigger, just because they would have the entire British Navy on his side. The struggle would be like the army, because he'd have to invade, you know, deep into continental Europe. I'm not sure if Britain would be able to do that at this time, but yeah, they would have the boats.
You think you're so great because you have boats!
Only question is, in this universe, does he make the same mistake and attack Russia? Because funny enough, even with the British Navy, that's not gonna help when invading Russia in the winter. Actually, yeah, I feel like I can confidently say that Russia would probably be their doom in this scenario too. Now, Napoleon would probably not get exiled because he'd be safe in London, but who knows, a lot of Europe could be eventually speaking Russian when this empire collapses, or even like Turkish, like the Ottomans. There would definitely be a revolt against this Imperial Britain. I would just like to add this world map to gain some perspective. We were just focused on Europe, but if the UK had Napoleon, remember there was a little thing in the Americas called the War of 1812. I don't know if the US could have beaten a British Napoleon. Kind of a scary thought. But who knows what kind of priorities he would have. What if Russia sold a lot more than just Alaska to the US? So if you didn't know, we bought the Alaskan territory from Russia. They needed a bit of extra cash during that time. But what if they just sold like all their territory to us? This is known as the US Commonwealth of the Far West. Basically, Russia has become our 50th state, I guess. Well, they were actually added as the 49th state in 1959. Funny enough, the state capital would have to be Vladivostok, since Moscow is just way too far away from the US. It can't be too far away from DC. So we have a whole lot of Russian people in our new state government. Obviously, this would be our new biggest state. I mean, Alaska's our biggest state already. All of Russia would be, well, all of Russia would be bigger than all of the US. And the state alone would have over 100 million people living in it. Like 2.5 times bigger than our biggest state by population, California. This is obviously the most insane idea, but still kind of funny to see. They divided everything up into districts, and all the years they've been established, I don't really know what else to expect. Definitely not Mormon City, though. Did all the Mormons move to Russia? This is a joke about how Americans say Moscow. New Anchorage is just set up over here. So Russia sells itself to the US. That old King Alexander was just tired of dealing with it, I guess. The US, but territories and states were never split up or shrunk. So basically, if we just never reorganized everything. First thing to note, there is no Vermont. Man, this is so ugly. I actually think Virginia would be a lot bigger than this, right? Well, they would have to buy Louisiana, and then that would cut off Virginia. Yeah, all those original 13 colonies extended way out west. They'll grab Florida from the Spanish. Mississippi is still here. Funny enough, I still don't think Louisiana would be the most populated state, even being this big. They also never fully settled with Canada along this parallel here, so we're still like reaching into modern day Canadian lands. The Oregon Territory still exists, and we got a big, thick Utah. Remember that original Texas stretched way far. It was really ugly. And then here's the New Mexico Territory. Much changes out of Alaska and Hawaii, though. Oh, and then the entire Midwest, or at least a lot of it, just becomes Indiana. This This is really horrifying. I really don't like this. I know that if you think about it, the US states look kind of weird, especially when like looking from the east to the west. Like it's really obvious we were trying really hard over here, and then as we got out further this way, we just started, you know, saying whatever, draw straight lines. I can't help but think of this image whenever I see the US state borders. But yeah, it's fair to say this is so much more horrific. You didn't even give South Carolina's silly panhandle crap. I actually had no idea they did technically have a silly panhandle in like the 1700s. Man, this could have made everything so great. Everyone's talking about how their state is actually supposed to be even way larger and more ridiculous. This really does put things into perspective. I'm so glad we don't have these borders. If you think the states look physically bad, can you imagine what the flags would look like? The 1964 US presidential election in the Cars universe. Man, I needed this. There's Lyndon B. Hall-Oppie versus, of course, Barry Goldwagon. One is Democratic, the other Republicab. Oh god. Running mate Hubert H. Hatchback, as well as William E. Minnie. I don't know how many car puns I can really take. Remember that in this universe, everything played out exactly like it did in our universe. It's just, well, they were cars. So of course the American cars overwhelmingly voted for Johnson here. Now I'm just thinking about the Vietnam War in the Cars universe. It's so horrible. Yeah, I can't wait till John F. Cadillac shows up. Richard Clarkson. I think I said that, whatever. I actually really needed this. Thank you for that. To my patrons this month, thank you. Lucas, the Canadian Goose from Avoca. ZaneyBoi, Sarsath. I cannot sleep without douche. Amateur Archaeology. aPhatNarwhal. Connor, DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood. Fredrik Tibblin, JohnDenver, KingBearHaze, Lucas, Prentice, LuxembourgLover, and the Tambre 760.